Hey, well, tonight I'm angry about vaccine passports. And I had thought that my fellow citizens, whether they're in the United States, the UK, Australia, any of the Western world, would be vehemently opposed to the government mandating a forced injection of a foreign substance into our bodies. This comfort has been taken away from me because I've seen polls recently that seem to indicate that the majority of people are in favor of forced vaccinations. Now, when I say a forced vaccination, I don't mean necessarily that you're being held down and forced to receive a vaccine. I mean that unless you receive a vaccine, you can't go to a sporting event, you can't travel internationally, you can't go to a restaurant or a store, or possibly even have a haircut. I'm going to show you two polls that are going to illustrate how fragile our freedoms are. The first one is from the UK. A poll undertaken by Ipsos Mori asked respondents to what extent would you support or oppose the introduction of a vaccine passport. 62% would support it in order to drink out or eat out. Only 22% were against. 78% said a vaccine passport should be required for international travel. 61% said it should be required to attend a sports game. And 58% said it should be mandated for public transport. Amusingly, or sadly, I'm not sure which, 56% said that you should have to provide proof of a vaccination before being allowed to receive a haircut. Is this just the crazy Brits? No. Here's a poll that was released over the Easter weekend by Rasmussen. This poll was conducted in the United States and asked likely US voters whether they thought requiring proof of a COVID-19 vaccination to return to pre-pandemic activities was a good idea. 44% said that they thought a vaccine passport should be required, more than the 41% who thought that it should not be required. The public health emergency that we've endured over the last year has opened a lot of eyes as to how much power we've allowed government to have over us. Nobody had any idea that governors could restrict our travel. Nobody had any idea that mayors had the ability to stop you from walking on the beach. Nobody imagined that in Spain, for example, it's just been announced that you shouldn't be allowed to swim in the sea without a mask. But my main issue is the question of papers. You know, we used to laugh at the idea of papers, please. We watch old movies of Nazi Germany. Papers are demanded of citizens on the street, and we imagine that such a thing could never happen here, could never be allowed here, and yet it appears not only as if it's imminent, it appears that it is here. The majority of us are in favor of vaccine passports. The majority of us are in favor of papers, please. How did we ever get to the stage? Here's a quote from Harry Litman, who used to be a US attorney and a deputy assistant attorney general. Here he is writing in the LA Times. Vaccine passports are a good idea. Among other things, it will single out the still large contingent of people who refuse vaccines, who will be foreclosed from doing a lot of things their peers can do. That should help break the resistance down. Break the resistance down, the resistance to having an unknown substance injected into your body, peer pressure to force those people who don't wish to be vaccinated, to force them to be vaccinated. This is not the Western ideal. This is not what freedom is. If we allow government to have this degree of control over us, it will never be over. This vaccine passport is the tip of the wedge. It's the nose of the camel under the tent. Once you have a vaccine passport, this is just the beginning of biometric identification cards for all of us. You know, when Social Security numbers were introduced years ago, we were promised that they would never be demanded, that they would never be used as a form of identification for anything other than official government business. If you've ever tried to deal with any entity, whether it's a dentist, a doctor, a DMV, you are forced to provide your Social Security number. Even if you make a phone call to your bank to inquire about your credit card, they're going to ask you to read your Social Security number over the phone. These vaccine passports are the beginning of the end. It's going to be a way to tie you to all of your information, whether it's biomedical information, whether it's financial information, whether it's your social score, whether it's your credit score, whether it's your worth as a human being to society. These factors are all going to play a role. We're going to allow the government to collect this information about us, to store this information about us, and to deploy it any way that they see fit. You know, these freedoms that we're talking about, these are not our freedoms to do away with as we please. These are freedoms that have been fought for by our ancestors. People have died. Thousands, millions of people have died over the centuries to gain these freedoms, whether they're fighting against kings in their own country, who are endeavoring to restrict their freedoms, whether they're fighting against invaders who are determined to remove their freedoms. These freedoms are the foundation upon which America was formed. They are our constitutional freedoms, our Bill of Rights, for example. And yet, almost half of us are prepared to just throw them away. Almost half of us are determined that the other half be forced to throw them away. This COVID vaccine passport is the thin edge of the wedge. It will be the end of us. There's no way that we're ever going to be able to keep any aspect of our lives hidden from the government, any aspect of our lives secret from the authorities, if we allow them, number one, to inject an unproven vaccine into our arms, and number two, to force us to carry papers that are tied to all kinds of information about us, information that we no longer control. This is not freedom. These vaccine passports are the beginning of the end, and if we allow them, we will deserve the end that we will reach. Please, let's wake up.